Welcome to the Pie Guy Podcast with your host, Matt Walker.
Welcome, everyone, to the Pie Guy Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Walker. My guest today is Brendon Huttmann. Brendon and I know each other from his time with the Pirates, where he was also the head of and God, this is the longest acronym of all time, the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. Is that right?
That's right. Society, yes. But you got it.
Society. All right, yeah. Which we worked together for a number of years on. That is basically the union for the strength and conditioning coaches in Major League Baseball. Like I said, Brendon spent time with the Pirates. I think I looked it up. It said you were with the Dodgers and the Indians/Guardians, right?
That's right.
And then I think, was there one more in there?
Yeah, I did some part-time, well, not part-time, but I did some work with some clubs a year or two before that as well. But in earnest, you nailed it.
Okay. Yeah. And then now you're working, I guess, because I couldn't figure out the Army or the U.S. government?
Yeah, both. So federal employee, I'm working as a Department of the Army civilian, and I lead a human performance team at the brigade level. So a brigade would be 3,000 soldiers about. And so I lead a team of 25 people, ranging from cognitive performance specialists to strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, occupational therapists. So it's an array of providers, and then they provide services to the soldiers for their mission.
So actually, this is really interesting, and I didn't even, this wasn't something that I realized when I was jumping in. So explain that to me. I never thought of this, but it makes sense. Trainers for the Army. So how does that work? People that are getting deployed on missions go to you? Like, how does somebody get to your group? Because you're obviously, you can't do it for everyone. How does that work?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of describe it in just general layman's terms, sports teams and specifically professional sports teams have human performance staffs universally, right? Like that is a thing that's been a thing for at least 15 years. The Army has not had that, especially the big Army. Now, if you hear of, special operations community, they have had embedded human performance experts for, I would guess, up to 15 years. On the conventional Army side, this program called H2F, or Holistic Health and Fitness, is new to the Army in around the year 2020, which was the year that I jumped over from Major League Baseball to the civilian side in the Army. So this program is fairly new within the Army. 5 years in the Army is like not a lot of time because the Army is 250 years old. But it's in a good place right now. I guess the equivalent would be like, imagine, with working at an MLB team, having human performance experts embedded. That would be like a brigade. And then you would have underneath there what they call battalions. That would be like your minor league teams. So the minor league teams make up the entire organization. But it doesn't really work like, there's not like a major league team necessarily within our brigade. For example, it's just that that's kind of how the small teams break out, if you will.
So when you have this kind of training, is it only people here in the United States, or because it kind of just made me think, when people are deployed overseas, do they have fitness and training people over there? Is that something that happens? I've never thought of this before.
So the answer is sometimes, but likely less times than it is. And that's because really the goal of the program is to teach and train the soldiers so that during deployments that they can, coordinate and operate their own physical training, for example, which means that they don't need a team of civilians to help them, stay ready for the fight. And really, it's our job in garrison or locally where we work every day without conflict. It's our job to teach and train the soldiers ultimately so that, they don't need us in deployments.
So it's really like off-season training kind of thing where you're working on technique, you're working on things like, if I'm a quarterback, I'm in my shorts and I'm working, 2-3 months on certain types of throwing and changing my throwing style so that for the season I'm ready to go.
Yeah. Except the big difference between the tactical space and sports space is there's really no off season for the soldiers working in active duty in the Army. They are ready at all times, compared to sports teams which have seasonality to their calendar year.
Well, I guess I said that. I didn't mean off season as much as I meant, deployed and non-deployed. Like you're in the States and you're, I'm assuming you're not in the middle of anything and or anything, war basically.
Yeah, that's right. But at the same time, our unit could be deployed, and if the brigade commander said, "Brendon, we want you to come with us," I would be able to do that and open to doing that as well.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's not like civilians can't deploy. Civilians are deploying all of the time with in conflict and even in non-conflict situations. It's just a matter of, do you make the list of priorities
Yeah.
when the brigade commander is identifying who's going where?
So what's interesting though is like, again, this is just hitting me today because I wasn't thinking about it. But do they have metrics in the Army the way they have metrics? I remember my sister-in-law playing, and this is when it was relatively new, but now you see it everywhere. Is they have things on their body to check their measurables. They check their whatever. Does it get to that level now in the Army? Are they geared up that same way? Are they? I'm assuming they must have GPS. I mean, that's probably the best part of it. But do they check their blood levels? Do they check things like that?
They do. So soldiers are required to have routine exams, just like civilians should do. We are using wearable technology with our specific unit. Now, all units are not necessarily like everybody's using wearable technology. We are, for example, and we're really centering our use of wearable tech around teaching and training soldiers about the importance of sleep, for example. And the reason that we've started there, Matt, is that, almost universally, experts agree that if you're going to start one place, it's optimizing and making sure that you're getting the minimum standard amount of sleep, because that really plays into just general wellness and improving a lot of other areas, right? So if you sleep well, we know that you're going to perform better. Your levels of anxiety and stress go down. Your metabolism improves. Your food choices are likely to get better. It's just a cascade of events that happen if you secure minimum sleep levels.
What is a minimum sleep level for someone, well, one in the Army, but just then after that, what about in deployment? Like, what is considered a good amount? Because I'm assuming they're not getting 8, are they?
So the answer to that question is it depends.
Okay.
I have not been deployed, so I can't speak to that environment. The general guidelines, as you've probably heard, Matt, is in between 7 and 8 hours of sleep. Now, people react and respond differently to different quantities of sleep. So, Matt, you may say, "Hey, you know what, Brendon? I am great on 5 hours. I don't know what it is. I'm just okay
Yeah.
there." I would say personally, for me, it's 7 to 8 hours of rest, and also that number probably declines as we age. But I think just a general rule of thumb, like go to bed at a similar amount of time each night, and also do the best you can to wake up around the same time most days. Now, on the weekends, if you can get an extra hour of rest, like value added, if on Wednesdays in the middle of your work week, you can sneak out one extra hour of rest because you skipped your training in the morning, probably value added. So think about it that everybody's a little bit different in how they react and respond to levels of rest.
It's funny. I've heard them say a lot of times you can't make up for lost sleep, but I've always felt the opposite. Like if I had a long week, like there were times at ESPN, like during the football season, where I'd get in at like 10 a.m. and I'd leave at 2 a.m. But if I could get an extra day that I could, get 10
Yeah.
hours, I always felt like I could bankroll sleep almost, or, I always felt I could that way. So you're saying that is possible, right?
Well, I think it's different for everybody, but I would
Yeah.
say personally, I feel similar, just anecdotally, to how you just reacted. I know on the weekends, during the week, I get up very early, and I choose to do that. But on the weekends, I mean, even if I sleep in another hour to hour and a half, I just feel noticeably better.
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. And you said something that was interesting. You said as you get older, you require less sleep.
Yeah. So as we age, there's just biologically something that happens where I think generally as you age, people have more trouble sleeping.
Oh, okay.
And then also the requirements for the physiology also decrease a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, and I think as like kids, for example, require what 12 hours of rest, 10 to 12 hours for ages up to 6 or something. But again, I'm not a sleep expert. I can just kind of go off of
No, sure.
what I know and what I personally follow.
That's interesting. So, do you ever have them looking at the metrics while they're deployed and then get a call and hey, this group is not performing well or their numbers are down? Like, do you ever in deployment look at numbers, or is it something that you look at when they come back? Or
Yeah, so our use of wearable tech is fairly new within this last several months. So I haven't
okay,
come across that deployment scenario yet. The way that we're using it right now is that the number one thing is helping people have a general awareness about their sleep habits and patterns.
okay,
And then what we'll do is we allow soldiers to monitor for about 4 weeks. Those 4 weeks are important because wearable tech, like the Oura Ring, requires a little bit of time and data collection before algorithms begin
okay.
personalizing. And so after that 4 week period, Matt, we then have 5 consecutive weeks of education. So 1 hour of education, 5 Tuesdays in a row, and we do things like explain the Oura Ring app. We talk about metrics to consider paying attention to. We teach soldiers about the physiology behind sleep, and then different coping mechanisms or ways that you could go about improving those numbers.
So, and again, I'm going back to my sister-in-law. She was in the Olympics and she was played at a really high level for field hockey. Um, they had things even back then where after every game, they would basically get a cocktail that was designed for them to replace. Is that stuff they're doing in the Army as well?
So that's not happening in the unit that I'm working in, but I'm fairly confident that is happening in some units. That is widespread across the professional sports community as well as like college.
Yeah,
But the scale of the Army is just a whole nother beast,
yeah,
Matt. And so
yeah.
for us to get to that point, we're quite a ways away from that.
Okay. And the wearable is still very like special units, and because it's just like you said, the scale. You just can't. You're probably at least not now. Maybe one day, but not
Yeah,
at that point. Yeah. But interesting.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
It's interesting because I guess being in the Army is the ultimate athletic endeavor, but it's funny. I never considered the wearable part of that. Wearables are funny. I remember when they first came out, and the sky was the limit. There were so many great things, and I remember, we were talking about going to a game, and everything was based on you could come in, and me being a fantasy person, it was like, oh, you could come in and like we could play games, or we could pick the winner of, like, at the Yankees game, the subway race, or I'm sure the Nationals, they have the presidents that run around and
Yeah.
things like that. And there were so many cool things like that, but then it was also food, ordering, all this stuff. And then in the end, I feel like the only thing that came out of wearables was like it could check your heart rate and your steps. It feels like it never grew from there. Like, did you have to read Fahrenheit 451 when you were younger?
No.
So this was a long time ago, but when you walked in, I mean, this was early 80s that they were, this was written about, and I think it was earlier. You walked into his house and it would change the atmosphere and it would change the temperature and it would do all these things. And I always thought we would be there. I guess it's like the Jetsons car. I figured
Yeah.
we would have been there by now.
Yeah.
But instead, all we do is like count our steps and,
Yeah.
hey, you're having a heart attack.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is interesting. So let's start from the beginning, and let's even give everyone an introduction if we can, because I gave a brief introduction. So where are you from? How did you get started in this space? I would love, for people to hear how you got to Major League Baseball. That must have been such a interesting journey. And then I'd love to talk about the life of Major League Baseball, because having clients that were baseball players, like, they travel, but when you know someone specifically and you're actually watching them, like, go from Toronto to the West Coast and then back to like Milwaukee, and then you're like, oh my gosh, like how did all that come about? And then, like, what are the challenges that presents for you in the health space and things like that?
Yeah, so I'll start a little bit. The first question you had was, where am I from? So I grew up in the Midwest, born and raised in a small town in Nebraska. Lived in a variety of places as I grew up, from Omaha to Kansas City. But when people ask me where I'm from, I would say Kansas City. Um, and Matt, my path has a lot to do with really a childhood dream of making it to the major leagues as a baseball player. Now I didn't get there as a baseball player. I did get there as a strength and conditioning coach. And so I played college. I played middle school, high school baseball, and played junior college baseball. And got to my sophomore year in junior college, and was really having to find some other ways to compete at the same level as my competition. And so that's where I discovered strength and conditioning, nutrition, sleep, the core components to support performance. And so because I was manipulating and learning about those, I was able to perform at a similar level as my peers. I had the opportunity to continue playing at the Division I level as a transfer from junior college. I made the decision that that was not going to be for me. And some of the things that were happening to me was that it just wasn't fun for me to go to practice anymore. I wasn't enjoying playing the game, which is the entire intent.
Yeah.
However, like, I really loved being around the game, and I still had a goal of getting to the major leagues. And so at that time, I pivoted to transfer to the University of Kansas and finished my degree there. While I was there, I volunteered as a strength and conditioning coach for the 2+ years that I was there, and met a few people along the way that helped me get into professional baseball once I graduated. So finished schooling at KU, and jumped right into a short season job with the Colorado Rockies for the summer in
Oh,
Pasco,
wow.
Washington. And I was just kind of like sitting at home that summer, and I was thinking, what could I do to contribute to my career? And came across a job listing in Pasco, Washington with the Rockies, and said, shoot, like, this is gonna build build to my resume and kind of keep me moving in the direction I want to go. The following year, I was hired full time with the Cleveland Indians. I worked in their minor league system for 3 years, and then it was promoted to the strength and conditioning coordinator position. Held that role for 2 years. In that role, your job is to coordinate running and lifting programs for the entire organization. I also served as the major league assistant at that time, uh, and then was hired after that to the Los Angeles Dodgers as their major league strength coach. And Matt, that's where you and I cross paths. As I was finishing my time there, became the president of the PBS CCS, and that's where shortly before that you and I linked up. I was just like the secretary of that organization. We were working on some website stuff, but served 4 years with the Dodgers before I was hired over to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Worked with the Pirates for 9 years. Had three different positions while I was there, all promoting upward. First was major league strength coach. Next was sports science coordinator, and the third was director of performance science. And so my most recent position ending in 2020 was director of performance science. And then at that point is where I transitioned over to the civilian and the Army space, which we've already talked about.
That's interesting. So let me ask you a question about minor league baseball, because we have a team right out here in Hartford, and you go in there, and I'm assuming the money isn't great at that level. Is that correct? So how is that just finding a space to live and all? Like, is it a very transient thing where you're getting a temporary space, or you being part of the organization? Do you have to go out and get an actual apartment that you live, and that's just where you live now? Like, how does that work? Because it always feels so weird to think that there are players that are here, and some of them might only be here a few months. Like, how does that whole minor league thing go when you're in there?
Yeah, so at that time, and again, this was 15+ years ago, you were responsible for your own living arrangements, and so the organization might give you a small stipend that would contribute towards paying your rent, which was complicated. So generally speaking, at that time, try to find a roommate, try to find an apartment that has flexible lease options. It's also frustrating because you're only at that apartment about half of the time, right? Because
Yeah.
in baseball, you're traveling half the time and you're home half the time. And so you're paying kind of double the rent, if you will, because you're just not there very often. Uh, but that's kind of how it goes. You're kind of on your own. It's a little bit it's like pushing the rock uphill at all times.
No, but that must be fun though, in the sense that like you have this organization of people that are in the similar thing. So, I mean, that must lead itself to a lot of camaraderie and,
Yeah.
a lot of fun times because they're probably like you. They don't know anyone and they probably want to get dinner or something or grab a beer or something. Is that a great time to, especially when you're young? That must have been a fun time, right?
For sure. I mean, Matt, one of the reasons, so a couple of reasons I got into strength and conditioning. One is I shared a growing passion for it. The next was trying to get to the major leagues. But the third would be just being curious about new experiences. And at
Yeah.
that time for me, that some people may view those scenarios as kind of like threatening or uncomfortable. For me, I was kind of motivated by that.
Yeah.
The travel around the country that wasn't costing me anything
Yeah.
was like really motivating, energizing, driving me to be okay with some of those trade-offs.
Well, it's funny too because the minor leagues with all the wackiness and you must have seen so many funny like promotion nights. I mean, I only know like the yard goats here do a great job, but you see these things where they're wearing like tuxedo nights and all these weird. I mean, you must have seen some crazy fun
For sure.
stuff.
For
Yeah.
sure. And in fact, to your point, I'm still doing some work, work the MLB Combine, try to do that annually because it's my chance to kind of get back to the community and be around the game still. But I ran into a former coach on a minor league team I was on, and we were sharing stories about riding the bus together. He sat in the seat in front of me on all bus trips for that year, and it was so great to see him, Matt, and share some of those stories that we had. Some that we're super proud of, and others that maybe we weren't so proud of. But that's okay. Nobody got hurt. But we try to do it the right way, and I've seen a lot in minor league baseball. Some good, some bad. At the end of the day, it's an incredible experience.
Welcome back. We had some technical stuff here with the uploading. But Brendon, you and I were talking about the bus trips and minor league baseball. And it's funny, that must be almost like family vacation, where you're in this car and you want to kill everybody. But then, like, in hindsight, it probably, the amount of funny stories or things people do, or even getting under each other's skin on these long trips must have been hysterical. I mean, it must have been like, I don't know, like that's the stuff as an athlete you miss the most is really the camaraderie and the locker room stuff.
Yeah.
And to have that with the bus trips, and now you're adults, it must be pretty funny.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you really want to get to know people, it's outside of work, and the reality is in minor league baseball, you are with each other just nonstop, and in the major leagues as well. Like you're
Yeah.
always you're traveling as a team. You're at the field or the stadium from noon-ish all the way to midnight, and it's just you either can do it or you can't.
And that must be hard, like, because you had a family while you were still in that grind. That must be very hard.
That was hard. One of the reasons why I decided to leave baseball was that if I think about parenting in thirds, like you've got that first third where your kids are little, you're just trying to get them to sleep, and then they kind of transition into becoming teenagers, and then after they're teenagers and they go through high school, then they kind of in that last third where they're in college, and we were personally, my wife and I were in that first third during my time in baseball, and my transition, out of there had to do with enjoying that second third, which is where we are right now. And that second third is where I think dad has a little bit more responsibility
Yeah.
in the parenting,
Yeah.
where I'm head coaching my son's 11U baseball team,
That's great.
doing the best I can to get to my two girls travel soccer games, having other teenage kids over to the house to hang out outside and being present for that, and I'm super thankful that I'm able to do that now.
That's awesome. It sounds like you were able to kind of get the best of both worlds because I have four kids. I don't know if you ever knew that, but I have four kids of my own. And as a dad, the best times, like I know moms always really tend to like when they're really young. To me, they start getting 8, 9, and they start making fart jokes, and they start, they start being wise guys, and then I don't know. That's when the fun begins, and their friends come around, and you could pick up sports with them. You coach them. Like
Yep.
that was my favorite time, was the coaching and all that. Like, and it's frustrating at times, but like you can't get that time back. To me, and I'm sure you agree because you seem like such a great guy. Raising kids is the greatest thing in the world. And the fact that you get to do it, I mean, I made it a priority myself where I put my career second, because that time is just, it's a blessing, whether you're religious or not. It's a blessing from God or whatever. And to have that time and to laugh and to, I think it's so pivotal for the kids, and you're getting that now. And that's the best time, right? Like 11 years old, funny, right? The kids, you're probably hearing the conversations in the car on the way to, the games. Like, would you agree? I mean, that it sounds like you did it right.
I definitely agree. I think that, you were kind of hinting at this, but that first third where the kids are little and struggling to sleep, like for me personally, that's really not my jam. I wouldn't say I'm very good at that.
Yeah.
I would say that I am better at this middle third, where, especially since, take head coaching youth baseball, I've got a 20-year Major League Baseball career as a strength and conditioning professional, yet being around the game a lot. And so my viewpoint on development is just different than maybe other youth head baseball coaches. So I've enjoyed that part of it, and it really, my goal for the kids on our team is that they have fun, that their experience with sports is world class, that we're true to our values, and then of course the only reason we're there, one of the only reasons, is to win, right? Like, so we're trying to piece together those three things, right? Like, the kids have to really enjoy the travel baseball experience. They have to enjoy being around their teammates. We still have to have our values, right? We have to work hard. You're going to respect each other, and the coaches and the parents. We're going to learn how to look people in the eye, especially adults, when they're talking to us. We're going to do the little things like double knot our shoes, and we're going to run in and out to our position so that we are showing and respecting the game. And we're going to have our jerseys tucked in and look like professionals, even if we are 11, because at the end of the day, those small actions matter in real life too. And so, really trying to tie together those two, and I hope that maybe 10 years from now, or maybe when those kids are in high school, they may say, "Hey, Coach Brendon, like, so glad you taught me those little things at that time. But Matt, that payback doesn't come for another 5 to 7 years." So, if not, I think I'm doing the right thing in paying that back.
And I want to get to a lot of what you said, because I coached a lot of sports. I coached football for 15, youth football and all that. Number one, no one explains to you the nightmare that is tying of shoes at a certain age group. So your double knotted thing, very smart, because that's one of those things where you're shocked how many times you're tying shoes in that second, third grade, and actually even all the way up to that. But it was funny in my head when you were explaining it. I pictured your team in the greatest condition running, but also like, "Hey, Rodriguez, your hydration's down. I'm checking your numbers," and you have your iPad and you're
on the wearable tech or something, right?
And you have, at the end of every game, you have their like little cocktails lined up to replace the nutrients that they lose in the game.
Yeah. Well, we really just started with, there's really 4 things that we have to do. And I've been working with this group of boys for 4 years now. And the double knotting of the shoes, it's really like an example of bigger things, right? That's so controllable. And the famous coach John Wooden would start with teaching his players on how to put their socks on, right? Well, it's not. Of course, it is that, but what it is also is taking care of the little things. And so, one of the things I tell the kids with rule number 1 is we always double knot our shoes. Is there inevitably, when we are playing a tournament, the player on another team will ask the umpire for timeout, and all the kids will go to tie his shoes. And all the kids will look at me and they'll go, "Coach Brendon, he's tying his shoes and he had to call for timeout," right? So it's feeding itself back, where they say, like, "That's super embarrassing. We should never have that happen."
Yeah.
Our rule number 2 is we always, when you're wearing baseball pants and you have your jersey on, you are always having your jersey tucked in. Our belt is right over the zipper portion of the pants. And again, it's about these little things, right? It's about showing up professionally.
Yeah.
Rule number 3 is we always run it on and off the field, because you never know who's watching you.
Yep.
And you always want that other coach to make comments on just the hustle, the professionalism, how you play the game. Rule 4 is we always look parents, coaches, teachers in the eye while they're talking to us. And the reason we do that is to show that we're both listening and that we respect them. And that's rule 4. And then rule 5, which we're working on a little bit, is how we pick up each other in between the innings. It's more of a baseball nuance thing. I don't have to cover that, but those four things, I think, Matt, you do those in real life, and you're getting a great start on life, and you're gonna get respected real quick.
Well, yeah, and like I said, my main sport was football, but I coached rec basketball for probably the same amount of time, and then lacrosse and other things. But the things you're talking about, that's the stuff that matters in youth. And again,
Yeah.
you're teaching them skills for life, which I think a lot of people look down on sports, especially I live in a somewhat of a bougie town where they look down on sports or they don't understand it. And those things you're talking to at any level or any class or any whatever, they're so important. Even looking someone in the eye.
Hmm.
That was a skill that I learned probably in my mid 20s, but I think that's something that serves me well. I used to do the trick where I would look at their ear, and then I found a thing where I just like look in and I find something in their eye, whether they're retina or whatever. And it's like you stare so deeply at that, you're not even realizing you're staring at them in the eye. But the way people feel engaged when you do that, it's a huge advantage in life. And those are the things I think that youth teaches you. And that's another thing, because having run organizations for years, you have two types of coaches. You have the ones that play their kids' friends and they coach forever. But I used to say to my kids, like, if you ever saw this coach out in the mall 5 years from now, are you saying hello to them? They're like, oh no, I'm going the other way. And I was like, that's to me the difference. Like, I still have kids in college writing me notes and letters, and they're on my
Yeah.
Instagram, and the
There you
parents
go.
still come up, and yeah. And another thing, and I don't know if you've had this, but with football, it's a common thing, is you would have a lot of parents of single moms and things like that. So you were taking on this extra kind of job where they were asking me to do things outside of the sport just to help them, because they wanted their kids to learn discipline or doing the right thing. And so it's funny, people don't realize that not every youth sport coach has this, but those things you're teaching could very well direct them in their life in a major way. Like, everything you just said is so small but so powerful. Like, I agree with everything you said. I will say my shirt always came untucked, but I feel like in football that's a little different. I
Football's
never
different.
Yeah, I never liked the tucked shirt thing, and they'd be like, oh, tuck your shirt in, and I'm like, oh. but
Yeah.
but everything else, absolutely. Like, and I try to teach my kids, like, lay out your thing the night before,
That's
put on
right.
your
For
shoes.
sure.
Yeah, tape your feet. And they're like, why are we taping our feet? I go, you tape your feet, you tape your wrists. I'm like, you're going into battle. It's part of the preparation. You're not just rolling up. You're thinking about it. And again, it's like, you probably don't need to tape your wrists, but it's just the mental prep of getting ready, getting in that headspace.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And again, like, none of these principles are like, you wouldn't go, oh, well, that's brand new. It's just the fact that we're doubling down on doing the small things. And
Yeah,
it also has to do with, my perspective on sport is the way or the opportunity for us to be able to teach lessons, right? We have to
yeah,
wait for things to happen in the game, and that's an opportunity as a coach, a mentor, a leader, to step in and say, like, this is an opportunity to learn about how to move on quickly, or to recognize that failure happens, and not be discouraged, or maybe you need some confidence or whatever. And so that's where I think my background in coaching, as well as being a parent with three kids and a boy that's 11, helps me connect with those boys pretty quickly. And super proud of the time that I'm spending with them. And it's a big commitment, but it'll pay off long term for the boys.
oh, absolutely. I mean, even the thing you said about running on the field, like in football, when I was younger, I was sadly, I'm a Jet fan, and when I was younger, I used to go to the Jets practices with Bill Parcells, and even then, I was just out of college, having played football, at that point for so many years, watching the practice where it was drill to drill to drill. It was all timed, whether you're done with the drill or not. You were just moving. And I realized when you run and move from here to there to there to there to there, it sets an expectation of a fast pace of moving. And that changes everything. It also allows you to hide conditioning into that. But
Yeah.
that sense of urgency, and it's those little things, like you mentioned, Coach Wooden, which I've seen so many quotes, I can't remember them, but there was a great story. I forget the guy. Oh, Mark Harmon. He's an actor, but he played football at UCLA, and he said every day he would go put his equipment on and he would be sitting in the basketball gym. He said, and I just, he was the quarterback for UCLA, and that was during the Walton years. And he said two stories which were really great, but the second one I remember was, he said every day Bill Walton would come in and he'd come in with some sort of thing where he was trying to like change Coach Wooden's ways. So he came in one day and he sat down and he goes, "Hey, did you get that haircut?" And he goes, "You know what, Coach?" And he spoke for like 5 minutes about, especially at that time, this hair represents me. It's very important. It's who I am. And he went through all these things. And he said, "Bill, that was an incredibly well-spoken, well-thought-out thing. I love that you really articulated yourself. And, it meant a lot to me that you took the time, this, that, or the other thing." And he was like, "Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Coach." And he goes, "And we're going to miss you."
Yeah.
And he
Exactly.
said, Bill just grabbed his bike and went down and got his hair cut. And I was like, it's true. It's like those great coaching moments of like, these are the rules. This is how you do it. This is, you don't waver. You don't make special rules for other players. Like they learn that. And I think, and I'm probably talking too much here for an interview, but I feel like this is more of an open conversation. But I have a lot of passion about talking about coaching youth sports because to me, when you talk about these things, I think I'm a pretty good dad, but I'm like, I don't know how to be a parent without sports. Like I use the sports to teach all of these things. Like how else would you teach your kids, like you said, like running on the field, running off the field, tucking in your shirt? Like those are the lessons or how many things happen in a practice or in a game that you teach them, how to handle it, how to deal with adversity.
For sure.
Like I said, I'm sure there's a million ways to be a good parent, but if it wasn't for sports, I really wouldn't know how to teach most of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sports are hard, right? And another really easy example is, every kid strikes out, and inevitably somebody, I've been on these youth teams where some coach wants to say like something about your kid comes back and coach wants to remind the kid that he struck out. What my thing is like, dude, don't you feel like that kid already knows that he struck out?
Yeah.
So like, why are we gonna
Yeah.
keep talking about that? No one goes up to the plate trying to strike out.
Yeah.
And so from a
It's
coaching
not like
philosophy,
he didn't want to hit it.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So from a coaching philosophy standpoint, I try to I want to more empower people or break them free of their barriers than I do want to make them aware of maybe where they're short, right? Like it plays over into the professional life too, Matt, whether you're a designer, whether you work in a bank, whether you're a librarian, whatever it is, the bottom line is if you work with people, you should be empowering those people to go be their best selves. And I think, we don't have to remind them where they're maybe not good because I think they probably know that. So free people to go be incredible, especially in baseball where it comes with so much criticism already. I've had so much tough coaching in my playing and professional career, and really had a lot of people be hard on me, and that's really shaped a lot of my philosophy. Is that in some ways that kept me from being who I think I want to be, but in some ways that made me who I am. And so it's this balance between the two. But at the end of the day, like if you remove pressure from a youth athlete and their sense of how they perceive that environment, boom, they're going to take off. They're going to be their best selves. They're going to take chances, and they're going to get better.
And to me, we're talking about youth, but I use the same things being a manager of adults. There's never a reason to harp on what someone failed to do if there's no learning lesson. I mean, maybe there was a learning lesson because I'm not a baseball guy, but like maybe he got caught looking, or maybe there's a tweak, but nothing to feel bad about. Like I always feel like everything in life is a learning lesson opportunity, but the timing of that, like you said, because there is that shame. They didn't want to strike out. And some players are different than others, right? Some players are really hard on themselves. And then there are some players who maybe aren't as hard on themselves. So maybe there you have to remind them a little bit of, hey, let's look, take your time, just, But again, I find, especially in baseball, I never coach baseball. My kids are lacrosse guys and girls. But I do find in baseball, there's so many teams that I always found there were so many bad coaches just because the volume of coach, like in football, there's like one coach for the 8th grade team, but in baseball, there's probably 12 teams. So now you have to find 12 coaches. And again, like in baseball, it's a crazy amount of, everyone's staring at you at bat. Everyone's staring at you when you're pitching, and if you make a mistake, everyone sees it. I always felt like there was a lot of finger pointing in baseball, more than you would in a lot of other sports. Do you think that's somewhat true, or
I
by
would agree
bad
with that.
coaches? I mean, like bad coaches when they don't not
Well, it's difficult because I think that those coaches are doing the best that they can. I think just has to do with the level of training, experience, credentialing that they've had that got them to their point. And I think that my guess is they're all doing the best that they can. It's
Yeah,
just that there's just have different levels of experience, qualifications, and
yeah.
certifications that separate people in every profession. Uh, and the reason that they're there too is, it's different for everybody.
You're so much more positive. That was such a political answer. Oh my gosh! But you're
Well,
right. I,
I mean, the reality is, there are probably things that I do well and things that I suck at, and
yeah.
hopefully, when in the places that I suck, I hope people are probably giving me the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
and doing the best that I can, and that's kind of my approach.
I guess in my point of view, I'm not talking about the people trying hard. I'm talking about the people that just care about winning, the ones that stack their teams. Like, because to me, um, I never worry about winning. I worry about all those details that you're saying. And then I tell everyone, if you worry about the kids, you worry about the bottom part of the roster. A great thing you said that I was a big fan of is I always would cultivate an environment where the top part of the roster is cheering on the lower part when they have their little accomplishments. I feel like when that happens and people are working together, the wins kind of just come.
Yep.
And that to me is I guess what I'm talking about is when you have those coaches that are just trying to like stack their team, or oh, this kid stinks, we need another player, or we lost because I don't have the players. And that always frustrates me because I'm like, most youth sports is about energy, and it's about like people being excited to be there, wanting to go to practice. I hate when people say, oh, the goal is to have fun. And I'm always like, no, fun is not a goal. Fun is a result of doing all the other things. And then
Yeah.
we have fun. Um,
Yeah.
so I guess that's what I was thinking. I don't want you to think I'm some, crazy person with these coaches. Just the ones you see so many times where you see coaches that aren't worried about the kids as much as they're worrying about their own accomplishments or something like that. And that can be
Yeah.
frustrating.
Well, and I think too, like, um, if your main if so for me, it's like if you're coming to the game and you're like, oh, I'm here to win, and you don't talk about development.
Yeah.
For me, you're choosing one or the other. You're either choosing winning or choosing development. And my argument is, why aren't you choosing both?
Yeah.
And I think if you're having to talk more about winning, for me, you should be already be coming to that fight with people knowing you're already a winner,
Yeah.
right? And so if you have to talk about winning, I kind of sometimes have some questions on whether, since that's your top priority, you're trying really hard to win, or are you just a winner? And
Yeah.
there's two different ways of
Oh,
operating your
absolutely.
world. Now, for me, I want both. We want to be a winning team, and we're trying to develop incredible humans. And in my opinion, I think I have the tools to do both. I'm not going to choose. I'm not going to choose one or the other. We're going
Yeah.
for both, right? Because we're trying to set the bar high. And some coaches just see it a little bit differently. But I really do think there's an environment where you've got an incredible team that wins a lot of baseball games, and you have players who are all improving both individually and collectively as a team.
Well, I'm thinking about it in anything. Like, say you work in a car plant. If you just talk about being number one, being number one, being number one, rather than, hey, the assembly line, this is a problem we need to take care of and we need to cut time. Like, if you're talking about those little things, it just adds to winning. Like, again, winning is a result
Yeah.
of the preparation of the, like, I was never, I don't know if it's my art brain or whatever. Like, I'm never in a game, especially like in football, I'm never going to like, oh, I'm going to change my defense and do all this stuff. Like, to me, we prep for the game. We have all week. We do the right things. And then if
Yeah.
we go in and it's not working, you take it on the chin. You kind of
Yeah.
try to make the best of it. And then you go back to the drawing board because, again, it's the process. And it's,
Yeah.
am I prepping? What kills me too is like in the football sense, you have to watch film, you have to prepare because you promised these kids that you would give them those tools, and that's more important than talking about
Yeah.
winning or whatever.
Yeah.
So Are you enjoying this part where do you ever get the inkling to go back that you're like looking for that? Or do you think maybe one day you will when the kids get older? Or is this kind of like you like this phase and, you could kind of come into baseball when you need to and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely enjoying this phase where I'm at, and I think what I miss most is the friendships and the relationships I have in the MLB space. And you mentioned it earlier in the conversation here, Matt. It's just the community piece of that. I spent 20 years in that environment,
Yeah.
and inevitably, running and meeting people like yourself during that timeline.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely miss that. And in baseball, I consider myself now being more a steward of the game, like being a spokesman. I hope to be a positive example for the game, and that being maybe important to me right now. But for sure, like I mean, I think people think about the past all the time, and certainly I find myself doing that as well. But my eyes are forward. I'm focused on right now, getting my kids, through junior high and high school and getting them set off into a good college environment. And then, I'm not sure what happens after that,
Yeah.
but I've got almost 5 years of civil service time accumulated this winter, and who knows if I accumulate another 5 or another 10. I'm not sure. As long as I continue to learn and grow, that's what's important.
Oh, we hit another snag. You good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Uh, Snag. Um, so you were saying it froze up, but you were saying you're good. You have your 10 years accumulated. That's different too, being a federal employee. That must be a little different experience, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It's one of the better jobs I think I've ever had. I have incredible support in the organization that I work in. The people I work with and lead every day are top-notch professionals. And really, I drive to work every day, Matt, thankful for those people around me. And then of course there's the service aspect. Is that as a civilian, I'm giving back and trying to help the soldiers, the men and women, they're serving our country, and feed them as the best that I can.
So, what has been the biggest differences between the two industries? Because there must be big, like you said, probably a lot more. Uh, like your success stories here mean a lot more probably because it affects life or death, and they affects those things. What are the major differences you found between the two industries?
Well, I guess the most obvious is the amount of hours worked per week. As a federal employee, you're required to work 40 hours per week and nothing more than that. So contrast that with Major League Baseball, where my guess is during the season you're working upwards of 80 hours per week.
Wow.
So if you look at the difference between those two, when I first started working for the federal government, I had so much extra time. Like I'm coming home in the afternoon, and I'm like, well, what do I do? That's a big one. I would also say that the second that comes to mind to your question, Matt, is how long it takes to get something done.
Yeah.
In Major League Baseball, if you need something done quick, you just go to the general manager, the assistant GM, tell him or her, describe what we're talking about, provide some few examples of why we need what I'm asking for, and it usually happens within a day or two. Well, the federal government doesn't work that way, and so
Yeah.
I'm working, right now, the things I'm working on are for 8 months from now, maybe 10 months from now.
Yeah.
And it's a continuous effort of working on tasks that you're going to accomplish in 8 months or 10 months from now. And
Yeah.
so the pace of um, getting things done is just completely different. And neither one is better or worse. It just is a different game.
Yeah, I worked for the state of Connecticut for a few years, and even Yale, which they laughed when they joined Yale. They're like, the United States government? I said, yeah. They go, we're older than that. So
Yeah.
he's like, there's actually probably more red tape here than the U.S. government. I was like, oh my gosh. But it is true when you work for these large, aircraft sized things, it's a lot different than you work for, and the sports game people don't realize too is that sports teams are more like small businesses than they
Yeah.
are You know, they're very nimble. They can do a lot, but yeah, like when you're going into a boardroom and there's, you know, 40 people that have to agree on everything you do, it just makes
Yeah,
things a little more difficult. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So, what's an average day for you? Do you do a lot? Do you go into work, or is it a lot of it still Zoom, or how do you do normal things? Do you live by a base or something?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I work, live outside Raleigh, Durham, and Fort Bragg, which is the one of the largest Army bases in the world, is located about 45 minutes from where I live. And so I do go into work every day.
Oh wow.
Um, yep. So I drive into work, and I tend to get up pretty early in the morning and train on my own. Get into work 7-ish, and then being done in between 3 and 4 every afternoon. Head back home, and then normally I'm home for 15, 20 minutes and then head back out for kids activities. So, at work, mostly administrative work, leadership of people, making sure that, my job is to make sure that they get what they need to do their job.
Yeah.
And then making sure that I'm communicating with the people one level that work one level above me and one level below me effectively. And so making sure that we've got some consistency with, informing people of what's happening at Echelon.
Oh, nice. That's actually very interesting that you go to the base every day. Base living must be a lot to take in, right? Because that's a whole other, that must be a whole other mental change from going to a baseball stadium, right?
Yeah, so I don't live on the installation,
No, not
uh,
live, just
but
just
work in there.
pulling in. Yeah,
Well, it's completely different.
yeah,
It's interesting. The Army doesn't care what you wear to work, what you look like.
really,
What they care about is, do you get the job done,
yeah,
right? Like that's the bottom line. Is do you reach the mission, right? Like that's what the Army is all about. The Army is going to give you everything you need, but they're not into surplus, right? The sports world is cool with buying extra technology just to try it.
yeah,
The sports world is good with strength and conditioning branding, clothing, right? Like
yeah,
that's a thing in the pro sport world. Having nice shoes is a thing in the pro sports world. The Army doesn't care if you have nice shoes, right? Like I go to work, nobody's saying anything about my shoes, right? They care if I get the job done. Both are fine, but I think the Army is specifically about getting results done and measuring it.
All right, we're back again. Hopefully, we've made the necessary adjustments with the tech side of this. We're learning every day as we go. So, we were talking about you shifted into this new space and the differences between, the Army side and the baseball side. What have you seen now that you're working with your kids, and maybe they're a little young yet, but what have you seen from like a strength and conditioning perspective that maybe people think, well, I guess I'm talking to the parents out there that want their kids to be in great form. Have you noticed anything that are kind of common training things that you think maybe need adjustments, or is there anything in that sort of this youth space that you think maybe kids should be more focused on than they are now, or anything like that? I'm just wondering, sort of using your knowledge of how the average parent that just they play any sport and how their kids should really focus on, rather than maybe what you're hearing them say they should focus on.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest one, and use the word form, whether you use form, readiness, or fitness, I think at the end of the day, like making sure that we're encouraging our kids to have good, healthy lifestyle habits. That might be running around during the summer with kids in the neighborhood. That might be having some organized strength and conditioning program. But I really do believe in keeping our kids active and setting the conditions them for, if they play sport, to do that in a safe way. There's so much talk in baseball specifically about arm injuries and overuse, and I think certainly there's mismanagement by some coaches, as well as parents not knowing some of the key things they need to do with their kids. But I think also, like, one way to mitigate that or lower the chances of youth injuries happening is just to make sure your kids are fit. Um, and there are a lot of ways to do that. That could be taking them to the pool and letting them swim around for a lot of the afternoon. It could be making sure they come for a walk with you after dinner. It could be signing up for a off-season training program. It looks different in every way, but I think it's you should, as a parent, you should be securing that because it's controllable for your kids.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, and I'm not a baseball guy, is I remember going to like an indoor bubble for something else for my kids and seeing these kids that play baseball year round. And it was like January, and this kid's like firing in like sidearm throws, like first to second. And I'm like, all his power and weight's in his elbow. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
it's January. Shouldn't that elbow, like, it doesn't look like a natural body movement. And it just felt like, shouldn't that kid be resting that arm at this point? Like, any growth you're going to get there. It felt like it just feels like in football there's a lot more like focus on rest and things like that, but in baseball it feels like they play year round. And some of those joints, they just, I just think of a young joint and all that weight on their elbow. That's got to be like, repetitive injury must be really tough, right?
Yeah, I mean, baseball is an overused sport. I think also one of the things you talked about is arm angle or release. So that's the place where the youth player throws from. Generally, if your arm is in a high angle when you release, that's a healthier spot. Also, spin on the baseball gives you the feedback for whether that's being released from a good position. So generally, if you have backspin on the baseball, that means that the arm is releasing in a healthy spot. And when our arm starts to drop to the side, that's where you're getting stress in places that we don't really want that at this age. Now, I'm not saying if you play second base and you make a quick throw that you make a sidearm throw that you're going to get hurt. I'm not saying that, because there are times in the game that require different throwing motions. But generally speaking, you know, um, you also, I think, need to be throwing frequently. I think there are times where if we do take too much time off, it's just too much for the body to adapt to, from the no workload threshold of the off season to the high expectation coaches may have in practice. So it's both, how do we program in the off season to make sure we maintain a minimum level of throwing volume, and then it's how do we transition to practice, and then as a coach, how are you going to transition that from building stamina in the arm to pitchers throwing bullpens and then pitchers to pitching in games. And that's a blend of art and science across that spectrum. And again, I'm lucky to have a background in this space, and I have a general sense. I'm not perfect, but I have a general sense on Matt, what that progression looks like and how to inform parents about how to get there.
So I have a question too about on the major league side. Like, you see the pitch counts seemingly getting lower and lower. Um, Pitchers, it seems like they don't like them even getting into the seventh a lot of times. But then you have the Japanese pitchers that pitch over and over and over. How does that happen?
Well, that's a good question. There are a lot of reasons why that's happening. One reason why the pitch count with American pitchers may be going down is that we're trading velocity for stamina. At the end of the day, if go run some sprints, run as fast as you can, you're going to run a lot less than if you run at 50% and do as many as you can, right? So the reality is that performance in baseball is just going through the roof. I mean, to see a velocity of 95 no longer catches your attention, whereas 15 years ago you'd be like, "Whoa, that's the dude." Now that threshold seems to be the upper 90s and even into the hundreds, and so that's the um, that's an example of how the game has changed. And I think can't speak too much about the Japanese culture and how they're specifically training their pitchers to tolerate workloads. And I'm also not as aware of the injury rates there, so I probably shouldn't comment on that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just curious because, especially as sort of a casual watcher of the games, there's so many things that have changed in the game just in the last 5 years or so. And the pitch count's one of those things that absolutely throws me because, even in the playoffs, I used to think, oh, you're pitching great. You can pitch into the eighth or the ninth, and they're pulling them so early. I didn't know if there was some evidence that, the injury rate is that much different, or is the numbers, overthinking that. I just wasn't sure if they found anything in the last 5 or 10 years about, longevity or something, or is it just about protecting your investment and your player?
Well, I think it's about performance tonight, and the technology has enabled clubs to take a closer look at how to optimize for velocity, as an example. And it's really a testament to the personnel that are in those spots using the technology and providing guidance to the players on how to maximize their performance. And there's a cost to high performance, much like driving your car in the red line RPM. You probably could do it, but at some point, that's gonna cost you.
Interesting. So we're talking about technology, and it's something that you have had a great focus on, even in your progression with the Pirates. It seemed you went from strength and conditioning to performance and more numbers and wearables and things like that. Did that change? Was there a drastic change in the increase on numbers and things like that, your conversation level and maybe your, like, how did it change being a conditioning person now that you have the wearable tech as far as talking to managers and talking to maybe, I got to believe that was a huge shift, right? Because they're listening to you more now, right?
Yeah, it is. It is a big shift. I would say just by nature, I'm more of a data person. And so even before the technology was abundant in baseball, I was finding ways to use numbers to provide guidance on performance. And so, StatCast was a huge point for baseball where we could now automate reports from StatCast, for example, and that's gone to a whole nother level at this point in the game. Um, but for sure, if you can organize information, most of the time it confirms what you already know.
Mm-hmm.
If you have great data analysts around you, you also uncover new insights, and then that becomes conversation point with leaders across the organization. So for sure, impacts the way that people are talking about baseball on the inside. But at the same time, ultimately, the players are the ones that need to use that data, and not every player wants that data,
Yeah.
right? And you have to respect that too. Each person is gonna try to be their best selves in a different way, and some players really love the data and want all of it. Other players just aren't view it more as maybe of a distraction.
Yeah.
And as a coach, it's your job, your responsibility to find ways to communicate that information where it's meaningful to that other person. And if they find it meaningful, they're gonna more than likely they're gonna run with it, make changes.
That's interesting too, because it is such a mental game. We were talking about, the at bat of a youth player earlier, but yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I've gotten into just building websites and stuff is that, you know, paralysis by analysis is sometimes you're so worried about that you just forget to just do what you were trained to do,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. That's
So
right.
that's an interesting point too, is I'm sure there are a lot of people that feel like they're getting that crammed in their face, whereas, they just learn to play the way they learn to play,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there's a balance to that. It's like, sometimes the best decision is just to make one. And
Yeah.
that's the paralysis by analysis piece is when you find yourself in that spot, probably just best to make a decision. Doesn't either one of them is going to be better than not, and you just have to choose one and just roll with it and go and have confidence.
So how often in baseball, in Major League Baseball, do you meet with the coaching staff? Do you meet daily, weekly? Is it more long term or short term? Like, how do you talk about players, or do you wait till there's something to talk about where you say, hey, can we have a meeting? Number 28 over here is doing this wrong or that. Like, how does that whole thing come about?
Yeah, hopefully it's continuous. Hopefully we come to work, we're around each other, we like each other, and that we're talking organically about player performance. And as opposed to thinking, we're going to have every Monday a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon before batting practice, and here's the 3 or 4 topics. I think that's fine, but it's probably a more continuous process where hitting coaches are talking and hanging out with strength coaches and vice versa, and all of a sudden you find yourself having a conversation about a hitter, and both of you are contributing or collaborating on ways that he can improve. So that's the way I see it. Since you're around each other so much, you should be super efficient with communicating, your thoughts right up front.
Have you had that moment where you, like, a player's in a slump and you and the hitting coach are trying to, like, maybe figure out on your end, like, maybe why? Or, are you thinking, like, well, he's had this injury or he's had, like, have you ever had to come up with those, or the player comes to you because he can't figure it out? Or does that ever get to that level?
I would say yes, but I would also say sometimes when a player's in a slump, it is,
Yeah.
and like uh, trying to solve a problem that will probably solve itself sometimes is hard.
Yeah.
But for sure, I think at the end of the day, if you're a professional and you're seeing performance at a certain level, you're reflecting, you're thinking about it, trying to find ways where you can help. And I think players really appreciate that too. At some point as well, though, Matt, um, that player just has to do their thing and kind of work themselves through it. It's just one of those things.
Now, and are pitchers more likely to go to you too because they're measuring velocity and things, and maybe they're not getting to the levels they want? Is that because of that sort of every pitch being measured? Is that something where maybe performance has more connection to pitching than they would other positions? Or
Well, it's tough to say because a lot of the work is done mostly in the off season for physical development, where you would do things like gain velocity. I would say that if you're seeing velocity gain during the season, it's probably just a part of the arm getting fit and in shape, and that the pitcher's getting better with movement in general, right? And so, yeah, hopefully you're talking with pitchers, about their training routine, their 5 days of training in between their starts, and how you're going to make adjustments based on both the start before, but also the cumulative effect of the starts of the season, right? It's kind of like both pieces.
so is that something you do is, pitcher A pitches on Monday and then you map out sort of what they should be doing up to the next start?
For sure, for sure. So you're doing that continuously, and you're using the information that you have to provide guidance to that player, and that's a continuous effort.
So, and I know you're a very nice person and you don't talk negatively, but like when you see some of these players that are field players, but they might be a little more chunky, let's say, do they have a training regimen, or is it like, do you go lighter on those guys that are maybe a little heavier, or how does that factor in compared to like these other guys that are built like a Ferrari?
Yeah, it's tough because body types also play into this, right? So if you take a look at all the positions on the field, each position has a different body type that generally plays that position. And so, it used to be where front offices would be upset with a pitcher that didn't look great in their uniform,
Yeah.
aka they maybe were unfit.
Yeah.
But like here, the other side of it is like when David Wells goes in, dominates as a pitcher,
Yeah.
his performance is there,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's very challenging. I think at the end of the day, where I've finished on it is, you have to have a commitment to improve yourself physically. That's going to look different for everybody. And at the end of the day, you got to try to be getting better. And fitness is a huge part of, in this example, pitching well, right? Like if your fitness, your base of fitness isn't strong, and we're asking you to pitch for 2 hours, basically intermittently for 2 hours, be a start of whatever 6 to 7 innings, like you need to have some physical competency. You need to have a base of fitness, and you need to be able to repeat that motion multiple times, every 20 seconds or whatever it is. And so fitness is certainly a part of it. The optimization of body typing. If the pitcher comes and says, I really don't think I'm overweight and my performance and my pitches look good, the actions are good, the velocity is good, feedback from the catcher is positive. It's tough to make that case for that player, Matt, to say, hey, you need to be
Yeah.
like, you need to lose 10 pounds, right?
Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense.
Mhm.
No, I hope you've enjoyed this. The military part of this was a great little kernel I didn't really think about. So actually, what we just talked about what you're doing day to day. What would be a normal day to day from the Army? Like, do you meet weekly, daily, or how much in the weeds do you get in with each player, as opposed to maybe at a higher end where you're just like maybe putting together the group activities and things like that? Like, does it depend, or are you more working at the high level of the group workout, or are you getting to each person and doing the individual things with them?
Your question is more Army related?
Yeah, in the Army.
Yes. Yeah. So my job is to lead the people that go do that work. So, they go and they train the soldiers. The Army is awesome because it requires soldiers to do physical training from 6:30 in the morning to 8 o'clock every day. So the culture of the Army has physical fitness built into it automatically. It's incredible.
Yeah.
If you drive through the installation during that time frame, there are soldiers everywhere getting after their physical training. So we have strength coaches. And then other providers that are providing those services to the soldiers. In terms of my work, for sure have regular meetings with the brigade commander, which is who I report to. Those happen both weekly and monthly. It just depends. The Army's really good at having reoccurring meetings and having meetings that feed information to other meetings. Just incredible how they do that.
That must be amazing to you. You're this person trying to keep people fit, and you pull in there, and it's just like the Super Bowl of fitness. everywhere you look, you're probably very
Yeah,
happy to see everybody
yeah, it's
training
awesome.
like that. Do you ever train like and do any of the army stuff?
I do. I do. I try to train with the soldiers once or twice per week.
Oh wow,
I do it because I love training, and then I also do it because that's how you build relationships with people.
that's awesome. Yeah, I
Yeah.
noticed they had that with like Pete Hegseth and him
Yeah.
training them, and it was kind of the same thing, which is how do you get to know these people and know how you're affecting them if if you're
Yeah.
not training with them. Plus, in your case, it probably builds that kind of Major League Baseball camaraderie where you probably thrive in that because of those personal relationships.
Build relationships. It's a way to talk about work without having a meeting, and then
Yeah.
ultimately it's about building trust with other people.
How hard is it?
How hard is what?
The training, the
Oh, it's
military
hard.
training.
It's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard for sure. But that's what we sign up for, right?
Yeah.
Like any profession that you work in, hopefully you're signing up to do hard things. And if you do that repeatedly over time, you should be getting a lot better, which means you should be progressing professionally.
Are you like running the obstacle courses and crawling on your belly kind of stuff, or how in
um,
depth is this?
so I've done a few obstacle courses with the unit. That's not something I like do every day. I mean, I think the other difference is, I don't have training history necessarily
Yeah.
doing those things, and so, when I do that, I'm probably a bit more cautious than the active duty component soldiers are because they've got a lot of training history with those types of obstacles, and their bodies are adapted for that. Like my body isn't necessarily adapted to that. Although I would do it, I would do it at a different pace than I would, let's say, go weightlifting or running, something like that.
And it just occurred to me too. Do they do weightlifting and stuff, or is all their
For
work?
sure,
Oh, they do. Interesting.
for sure.
Funny. These are the things like until we start talking, I it makes sense that a lot of the athletic type training would be incorporated. I always just have in my head from all the army movies, them obstacle courses and climbing walls and stuff. It never occurred to me that they have weight rooms and things like that. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, for
Interesting.
sure. It's modern.
But it's probably more like lean muscle, right? And nobody's not. I imagine that they're not in there putting on the weight as far as getting bulky. They want to get more usable weight, right?
Yeah, it's about outputting a ton of work. It's about doing the most amount of work that we can. And that's the army culture. It's just about getting stuff done for these men and women.
So is that high rep more and things like that? Like what kind of weight? What are the things that they're focused on most as far as weights? Is it squats and stuff, or is it more like is it still more core kind of work or?
So I'd say it's parts of all of it. The Army has the Army fitness test, and so they're required to do 2 times per year, fitness testing. And so there are now 5 events in that array of testing, and so soldiers should be training towards that at the same time. They have what's called their MOS, and that's their occupational specialty. And so there are specific work requirements that they have within the Army as well. So it's kind of like two parts.
Now, like because they're moving all the time, is that training really difficult, or is it just to make sure that they're doing their normal daily routine? Or
I
is it
think it's
something you
both.
have to train for like a marathon where you're training to be ready for it? Or is it more just
Well, I think
base level
for the
stuff?
yeah, for the most part, it's about sustaining what you have, and then based on your twice per year assessments, that's feedback with, should you ramp up your training or should you just be sustaining kind of where you're at?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed this. It's hard for me to tell how long it is since we've broken it up into 3 parts. Did you enjoy this? I thought this was
This
good, right?
this is great, Matt. I really appreciate you having me on. It was awesome to catch back up with you. And
Oh, please. No, I loved working with them. It was sad when it ended because I had like an owner, not an ownership, but a sense of ownership over all the stuff that I worked on. Still one of my favorite logos I've ever done. Actually, even the first one I thought was really good. But that second one, the Atlas one, I thought was kind of cool. Oh, that's great. It's definitely one of my favorites I've ever done. It's, when you do this long enough, I'm sure just like you just, certain things just start to fade away over time. But that one tracks. That one looks as good today as it ever did. You know. So, but oh, and I still love my what is it, Pirate Strong shirt that I did. Love that. That was pretty. I think that was pretty revolutionary in that space because even now you see so many strength logos and they kind of look cheesy like a local gym. I thought that was clean and simple. I love the Pirates look. We went. It was not. They weren't home. We were traveling, but we went to see that stadium, and they have such nice branding there. Everything there is so beautiful. All that yellow, and it's a beautiful town. Do you miss Pittsburgh? Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, but it's a great town, right? Like it looked so coming from New York, and we actually have a house in the Pocono, so I have an idea of sort of the Pennsylvania has a feel, but they had that older kind of looking city, but it felt so new and clean and walkable. The food was amazing. It was a nice city. It looked like a great place to live, and the people seemed very nice. Yeah, that's awesome. So, well, Brendan, this was great. I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope you enjoyed this. And yeah, we'll catch up soon again one day. Thanks, Brendan.